Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the General Lecture for Postgraduate Program of Universitas Negeri Jakarta with Education University of Hong Kong. The Honorable Director of Postgraduate Program Universitas Negeri Jakarta, who will be represented by Profesor Dr. Arita Marini, Coordinator of Public Relation and Development Postgraduate Program.
To whom we respect, Professor Lo Sing Kai, Associate Vice President and Dean of Graduate School, Education University of Hong Kong, Professor Kong Se Chang, Director of Center for Learning, Teaching and Technology Education, University of Hong Kong, Professor Trent John, Associate Dean of Graduate School, Education University of Hong Kong,
Ms. Rachel Lee, Executive Officer of Graduate School, Education University of Hong Kong,
and our warmest greeting to all students and guests. It's an honor and precious opportunity for us, Farhendi Vicky and Zalfa Syaukina from Duta Universitas Negeri Jakarta to host you on this occasion.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we are approaching the main agenda of this event. In this session, Professor Kong Shishang will deliver a lecture about a sharing of research in artificial intelligence literacy education and the research possibilities of using ChatGPT tools for learning and teaching, which will be moderated by Ade Dwi Utami, PhD, the Coordinator of Article and Dissemination Postgraduate Program. To Mrs. Ade Dwi Utami, the time is yours.
Thank you for handing over the session to me, and good morning, everyone, the participant here in the room and also online. We're gonna have our second session today for our visiting professor from University Education Hong Kong. And today it is my honor to be here with Professor Kong here for the second session. And I would like to read your personal profile to the audience. I know you're now famous in Indonesia, I think. But okay, dear participant, Professor Kong Su-Xiang currently is Research Chair Professor of the Department of Mathematics and Information Technology and Director of Center for Learning, Teaching and Technology, the Education University of Hong Kong. Professor Kong, a doctorate from Department of Computer Science of the City University of Hong Kong. He also produced over 290 academic publications. Wow, that's big number. Okay, in the areas of pedagogy in digital classroom, teacher development, mathematics education, computational thinking education, STEM education, artificial intelligence literacy. That's our topic today, I guess. Metaverse literacy and policy on digital technology in education. He has conducted 82 research projects since joining the university in Education Hong Kong University. Professor Kong also at present serving as the editor-in-chief of the international journal Research and Practice in Technology Enhanced Learning and Journal of Computer in Education. So we can propose collaboration in this. Langsung. Okay, he was also the president of the Asia Pacific Society for Computers in Education in 2014 and 15, and will serve as the president of the Global Chinese Society for Computers in Education from July 2023 to June 2025. Prof. Kong was the convener of International Research Network, World Educational Research Association, or WERA, from December 2012 to December 2015. theory and practice of pedagogical design for learning in digital classroom from May 2019 to April 2022, and computational thinking education in primary and secondary schools. Prof. Kong is on the list of Stanford 2% scientists in education in 2019 single year data, in 2020 and 2021 single year data and career long data. That's what a huge achievement. I was like now having goosebumps reading your biography. He also won the Education University of Hong Kong President Awards for outstanding performance in knowledge transfer in 2020 and outstanding performance in administration in 2021. Prof. Kong is leading an international project on promoting computational thinking development and coding education for 8 years, starting from 2016. He is also leading a two-phase project on artificial intelligence literacy education in secondary and university education in Hong Kong from 2020 to 2025. Amazing biography. I think I'm very lucky to sit here with you. And I think I will hand over this session to you about the artificial intelligence literacy today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I hope okay, you can hear, right? Okay, thank you for the introduction. It's really a good opportunity for me to share here today with you, the colleagues and students, postgrad students from the UNJ, and hope this morning we can have some productive sharing so that we can learn from each other. And hopefully by the end of our sharing, myself and John later this morning, can inspire further collaboration between the academic as well as the postgrad students who, if you are interested to come and collaborate with the Education University of Hong Kong. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Okay. What I'm going to share today is a project that have been started during the pandemic in 2020, a very difficult time. We cannot see each other when we start the project. And it is about the artificial intelligence literacy. Now, when we start, what I'm going to talk in this morning, this 1.5 hours, there are two parts. The first part is to let you know how we start a project and with some publication opportunities. And then in the second part, I want to involve all of you, no matter you are in the field of AI or not for the time being, but please consider to join us together to do something in terms of AI literacy. Because when we are going into this term of AI literacy, actually, I cannot find any literature that use the term of artificial intelligence literacy. Yes, there are many discussions about AI education, but the literacy, this term, actually is very popular in the 1950s and 1960s. The literacy means reading literacy or writing literacy by that time because of the third industrial revolution. We need that for people to go to the factory to be a worker, and they need to be able to read and write. And by that time, the education boom in Hong Kong is we have many primary schools in the top floor of each building, because we don't have the campus for basic education. So for all many of the building on the top floor is empty. So they change it and convert them into classroom directly. And by that time, a lot of teachers are needed. And by that time, the education university is still not a university, it's the Institute of Education. We did a lot in teacher development. Now, after 70 years, we are now in the fourth industrial revolution. Everything will be go digitalized. And among all the digitalization, yes, of course, coding or programming, we need that. That is marked by Janet Wing, around 10 years ago, 2010. Janet Wing from the MIT of USA in Boston, they make the remark that everyone should know programming. And by that time, when we say everyone should know programming, they didn't go into how this can happen in school education. We do not have teachers who are able to teach computational thinking. So in the past 7 years, we started a project in Hong Kong. That is an 8-year project. This is the 7th year. And we are embarking with thousands of teachers, at least 1,000. They are language teacher. They are physical education teacher. They are not necessarily mathematics teachers. They step into the field. And after 7 years, we have 1,000 primary school teachers who are able to teach computational thinking. Now, for thinking education is brand new for all primary school teachers. You teach subject, mathematics, language, and so on and so forth. You seldom attempt to go into thinking education. So when we talk about computational thinking, it is about thinking education. It is itself is a very tough task. And of course, if you are not in the field of programming, you even don't know anything about programming, but you are going to use programming as the means to teach thinking, that will be very difficult. So in the past 7 years, we invent some slogan. The slogan is like this. It's very easy to remember. Pray, think, cook. Okay, just 3 words. You play around with that, the program. You don't write it, you play around with that. So you are trying to understand what is so funny, why it can work. Then it introduces something new to you, is how the computer can do something so interesting. So the playing is to motivate them to know something that they want to know. Then we inspire, we motivate them to think about what is that? What is inside this program that appeal to you? So you start to think. Of course, this is the beginning. You start to think, and then you have to write several lines of code. Not so difficult, but you go around with the code and think again, and cook again, and think again. Yes, that process inspires a lot of the primary school teachers. They never think about something that they never know about programming, but they start to do this in, say, 12 hours teacher development, and they become, because according to the survey, they say they are competent to a certain extent, of course, not very competent to teach and go back and teach. And they admit that they have to learn from their students as well. They are not the expert, but they can learn together with the student. It's difficult in mathematics, because you are an expert in mathematics, you teach them. You seldom work along with the kids, right? So you have to change your mindset to be student-centered, because you want to listen to them and see how they work and how things doesn't work. So that's the project that inspired me. After 5 years, I start another project. That is what I'm going to talk today. It's about the new term, artificial intelligence literacy. Who defined that? We are the team who start to define the term artificial intelligence literacy. That is really interesting. And we present in some occasion, we write article. Up to now, we have 8 articles, 6 published, 2 under review. It is about a framework of defining artificial intelligence literacy. Well, I think you can say, I'm as a young scholar or a postgrad student, am I able to define something new around the world? Now, the second part of my talk will be ChatGPT. You have the opportunity to step into the AI literacy field. And at this moment, ChatGPT is so popular. But I can guarantee within 1 year, there can be another room on introducing other AI platform and utility. And that's why it's a very good time for research by considering the possibility of mixing your own existing research with the support of some AI generative tool. And that is what I'm going to talk about in this talk. Okay, so that's the why I define the topic. And I let you know that I just, before I come last week, I make this determination, I make the decision to talk about this topic on Wednesday when Professor Low is chasing me. You haven't sent your topic. What are you going to say next week? I say, let me think about it. And then I have to immediately work with my team. I have to define what I'm going to talk. So everything is new. Everything is just in our mind. And then I said that will be 2 weeks. So I have to say something very solid. So in the first part, I talked to you in the past 2.5 years what I'm doing quite innovatively, and I step into the field. Actually, I'm not in this field. And when I learned about machine learning and deep learning, it's just not too long ago. Just 3 years ago, I worked with my team. I said, what is machine learning? Tell me. Because when I studied my PhD, when we talk about AI, it's about expert system. So my master degree program is the development of a timetabling system using hundreds of rules to define how to generate automatically a timetable for primary school or secondary school. So by that time, that's around 20 years ago, is very amazing already. But by that time, it's nothing talking about machine learning or deep learning. So when I come back to the field of AI, I understand fully that, okay, this is the way to go. So we start to understand what is machine learning and deep learning and how to teach them, especially just like the programming. The teachers do not know programming and they have to teach thinking through programming. So this time, many people around the world in Hong Kong or in Indonesia, they don't know too much about AI, especially machine learning and deep learning, but it doesn't matter. You can get along with them, say in, we use around 28 hours by self-reading. Most of the time is self-reading. And then around 8 hours is a workshop that we communicate with each other. So I share with you some slides. Okay. They can use it. So we start to introduce the AI literacy program 2 years ago. We defined that. And at the very beginning, it is not a 4-level program. There's only 3 levels. Because at the beginning, I'm thinking about, okay, machine learning is the basic. And then deep learning is right on the machine learning. So we have the level 1, course 1, and level 2, course 2. So we have the 2 courses. But at the very beginning, I say nobody can just learn through reading and workshop. What I'm going to do is everyone should have some hands-on experience, just like programming. You need to go to the Scratch programming environment or the App Inventor programming environment. You have to do the programming by yourself. You have to experience that. So that begin with the level 3 developing artificial intelligence applications. So even now, we work with the primary school kids in grade 5 or grade 6. They develop their own AI application, and they can do it, of course, under the guidance with our teachers and our program. But for university and senior secondary students, I think we work with them as a facilitator. We do not define the topic. They define their own topic. They find as a small group to some interesting thing, and they work along with what they think is important to these few students working together. For university, it is about the education university. It's very diversified for students joining us. It can be a language student, and they have a goal in their mind. They want to use the AI application to teach their students about something about pronunciation in Putonghua, or something like recognize some images, like some mathematics students said, marking the script of the students when they use the handwriting and write the formula and elaborate how they understand the mathematical deduction. Then when you mark, it is time consuming. So they want to set, can I use the AI? So many this kind of handwritten result from the primary students, and train the machine, and so that they later on can help me to mark some of the script. So when they join us, they have their own agenda in using the AI to do something. So initially it's a very vague idea, and then they join us with the machine learning and deep learning as the background knowledge. They know more the steps and how to produce quality data. And that's very important, because you can start a project and do something successful or not successful. And by the end of the day, it's not a commercial product, because the probability of recognize the handwritten assignment properly may be only around 50%, half, or 60%, cannot be commercialized. But as a assignment to them, it's really interesting, appealing already. They find it, how can I, in just 2 months' time, without any knowledge of artificial intelligence, and now I can do something in my mind that is interesting, appealing, and I worked out. And so that is the third course. And it works also for the secondary school students. The secondary school students, when the few girls come together, the age of 15, 16 years old, what topic do you think they are interested in machine learning to do the image recognition? They like the Korean star, and they can't really recognize their face very clearly. They said, I want to use the AI to help me to differentiate their face. Okay, anyone with any special interest, if of their own, will drive their self-determination to get a better data, because they have a lot of photographs already. So they know how to define quality images from their mindset. That's why we don't define topics. We allow them to do anything which is appealing to them. So we start with a project like that. So I think you consider, Professor Gong, you're lucky. You have some funding, and you can start with a team. But if I tell you the truth, is the budget is limited, and the team is not that big, just 2 or 3 people working together with all the learning and teaching material to be developed. They don't even know machine learning and deep learning when they join me. So when I make the recruitment, I say you don't have to need to know anything about AI. Join us, learn together with me. And that's why in 1 or 2 years' time, we develop 10 instruments in measuring what is machine learning. I want to find out from other sources. Unfortunately, I cannot. So everything is from nothing, from zero, from the program design. And you have the program, you need to evaluate, or you can't publish. I want to deploy or write on the shoulder of the other to have a framework to guide me through. I can't find it. I have to invent one for my research project. I don't have any instrument on hand. I have to work it out by myself. So actually it's not from empty in that area because I do it in computational thinking. Again, no instrument for evaluation. So I have some experience in computational thinking, evaluation, and I deploy my research experience and put it into the AI literacy research, and that's why we can move faster. And of course, very important is enthusiastic in this area and try to work out something that is okay. Okay, so another thing I want to highlight for this program, there are so many computer science and engineering departments. They should teach AI, they should teach machine learning and deep learning for a long history. I think at least 1 decade. So why I can't find a program for literacy is because they always mix up the concept of machine learning and deep learning with the mathematical formula. Because the computer science academic, the associate professor, the professor, when they show the slide about machine learning, it's always mingle with the difficult to understand formula. But I am a mathematics major is in mathematics. I'm not scared by all this formula. I take a look and I say, yes, the formula is an essential part of machine learning and deep learning, but it's not that critical. If you just have a look and then just have an idea of what it is, that's sufficient. It's not about the summation or the differentiation or the integration. It's not about that. It is totally, it's very simple mathematics in summation, horizontally, vertically, transposition, and all those kind of activities. It's not important for the learner, the young learner who know nothing or too much about the mathematics. So we use the term always, just like play, think, code in computational thinking. When I moved to AI literacy, I lit not a young kid's slogan, I play, think, code. Because for the primary school teachers, this is very important and very important to the kids. But now I'm going to step into the senior secondary students and the university students in general. So I don't use that jargon, but now this time I said conceptual understanding first. That is, don't step into the mathematical formula nor the Python programming. Don't mix them up. Because in general, people from the social science and humanistic are not that good in mathematical symbol as well as the Python programming. Take them away and purely on the conceptual understanding so that the people know is still understandable and they can rely on that to learn more. So that's why we want this program to be reach out to everyone in the city of Hong Kong, and if here in Indonesia, if you consider that's also applicable to you, please join us to do some research in this area. So what is the outcome? So in the past 2 years, we have trained university students 415, and then secondary school students 256. So more than 700 students joining us, and their feedback is according to the 5-point scale. I got always 4 point something for this way of teaching and how they gain from all this program. You can see a very small number at the top, that is course 4, right? So course 4, you can see, oh, only 4 secondary students and 13 university students from UHK. how can it be, Professor Gong? You must be very harsh, so people scare and all run away, right? They just finished course 1 and 2, and hence a number of them join course 3, more in the secondary school students and less in the university students. Why? Because this is a non-credit bearing in the university, so they escape if they are very busy in other matter. But for the secondary students, they come to UHK on Zoom. But ultimately, last year, we managed some face-to-face workshop. So they are working together with the teachers. So more of them can finish. But for the last course 4, actually, that is a pilot. And now this pilot course bear fruit already. Why? Because the course 4 is very innovative in the sense that they can step into any latest development of AI. For example, the ChatGPT, by November last year, we asked our students to work with the ChatGPT already, and they have some project. They are teachers. They want to make sure if the ChatGPT is coming up, how they as a teacher can write on that and work with their students. So that's why when the ChatGPT in Hong Kong just in the last this March or February is a very hot topic in Hong Kong, because the 8 university, some saying embracive to this new technology, some saying not at this moment. So that's why we speed up, because we have the background with our students step into investigate what is ChatGPT. So we teach concept. You want to ask me, what is the concept? So this is about one of the strength of supervised learning. So actually for machine learning, you have to understand a few concepts like KNN. So if you're a computer science student or engineering student or a mathematics student, you can directly understand KNN. K is a number that can be designed by anyone who want to define. 3 is the label you want, or 4 or 5, any number you want to design. But how to categorize a student with some mathematics score or an English score and put them together into a class, in general is a class list. But now if you machine learning, you can use the KNN algorithm. So the major point is about the algorithm understanding. So if you make a circle, I think you can see there are 3 circles there. The inner circle can include only 1 student. The second circle, you can see 2 circles, 2 students in a second circle. In the outer circle, you can see there are 3 students included. If according to the KNN, the students should go to the class with the blue one, because the new student should according to the nearest label, because you have 2 label in blue and 1 label in red. That means by voting, you should join the blue one. So that is the KNN algorithm. The definition is not that difficult to understand, right? Take away all the mathematics, just look at the diagram. Then you know this is a kind of supervised learning. So we use all these kind of diagram to make people understand machine learning is not that difficult to understand. And everyone should be able to understand. As far as you are graduate from senior secondary, you should have the knowledge to understand all these concepts. Okay, so this is the supervised learning. So this is the K-means clustering, that is unsupervised learning. So if you go to Google, and yes, they have definition. It's a very long elaboration, but it's not for general people to read. Unless you are math or engine, you said it's not difficult. But how about non-computer science major college, when they read that, they say, that's not my field. And then they will go away, right? But my mission is everyone should join us to understand, and will understand, not just locking your head, but you don't know anything, right? So that's why K-means clustering is a kind of a dynamic movement. So actually, this is difficult. Why you can use just the height and weight? Height and weight. Now there are 2 different units. height and weight. You cannot compare, right? Your the height and your weight is not comparable. So you need some mathematical concept in this way. That is to normalize the data. Okay, this is a difficult concept. This to normalize. Okay, if you don't understand normalize, that is we just convert the number to the range of 0 to 1 only. Okay, so even kindergarten knows 0 and 1. Okay, but 0 and 1 in between for all the weighting convert to 0 and 1 and the height convert to 0 and 1, and then you can make them comparable. And that is called normalization. Okay, after you normalize that, you can put them together in a diagram, and then you want to cluster. If a people have a certain weight and certain height with a 2 number, that is a coordinate. This is 2 dimension, so still manageable. Of course, for k-means clustering, it can be multi-dimension, that is n dimension. Then you cannot imagine. It doesn't matter. It just works similarly like 2 dimension. Okay, now why this is unsupervised? Because you don't know how it seems. Our eyesight, you can see there are 2 groups. Obviously, there are 2 groups, but in the computer, they cannot read this way. This is not a vision. This is a data, just a 2 number. And then we have to differentiate to which group they should go to. Because by k-means clustering, we want to differentiate in the 2 groups. By our insight, we can see immediately there should be 2 groups. But for the computer, they don't know. They just read all the data. So if through this process, you understand the data manipulation, how are we going to use some mathematics to do is the so-called data science, the data analysis, right? So, but for general public, then we just use 2 big claws. You can see the claws. And in the second diagram, you can see the claws is moving from one to another way. So why we can do the adjustment and why we need a calculation is because we want to use the distance of, if you define the x initially before they move, use the x, and using that as a centroid. And then if you just consider the previous version of the circle, that is we are going to calculate the x together with all the other points distance. And then you sum up all the distance, you can find out a number. That is a new centroid. If the new centroid is going to move to another position, we change the original centroid to another point. And we continue to make iterations of computation. You finally can go to a stabilized point, and that is the new centroid. So of course, if you have some concept of computation like programming, you know what is iteration, then you understand that this have to repeat and repeat to do the calculation once it change. And that's why it is heavy computing. But the algorithm is very simple. Just to measure the distance from one centroid and the other, if it is close to one of the centroid, you go to that cluster, else you go to the other one. So actually, we find that no matter what kind of complicated algorithm initially, but after visualization, it becomes not so difficult to understand. And then we can promote a genuine understanding of what is machine learning. And of course, later on, rely on this understanding and for deep learning and so on. So this is the way we do. So of course, for deep learning, we have the layer, and I seldom go in a detail in a lecture like today, because it is about convolution. That is, you magnify the nose of a cat, it becomes a pixel. But you need the pooling, because if you magnify too much, you cannot see. If you go deep, then you cannot recognize the surrounding. You have to go back, the pulling back, and then it's a dynamic process in going deep down, see more in detail, but too detailed, you have to coming back. So that is a dynamic process. So do you need to know the detail? I think you don't need, but you have to understand, okay, this is a way that we can differentiate, or we can recognize the face of a cat, or the visualization can be realized through this kind of dynamic process. Okay, of course, all this will go into a result with the numbers like previously and the weighting. And so the CNN, if in our workshop, then we have this kind of picture to elaborate, but more importantly is some hands-on experience on how the CNN work. And next week, I will go to France. Next week, just this week, I'm here in Indonesia. Next week in France, because they develop some robots to let us to visualize the whole CNN process. And I see that demonstration already. And I find that they can help people to understand how the neural network work physically with some experiment. So that's why I go there, and I hope I can find a more concrete way of teaching CNN. Okay, so that is the 3 courses that we have delivered and the project. And now I let you know a bit about the real-life AI application for the, these are some Python code. So we do not encourage our students to be a Python programmer, but we encourage to work with us to read the code, not to write the code directly, but at least you can read the code to have some understanding of how the Python programming can work, then call the library and do something like the KNN and the K-means because they are all already go into packages that you can call them, use them, and sometimes we can revise them a bit to tailor make to what we need. So this is and then we in the 4th course we go a bit in the Python programming by appreciation of the code, and then we also step into like this deepfake, how to generate 2 pictures into 1. So they have all this kind of experience. They understand that we can extract the characteristic of 1 picture and the characteristic of another picture and put them together so they generate the GAN. So this is all the faces are fake, are generated, not a real person. So so what do we do? So by the end of the day, we publish a lot because we don't have the framework. So we have to define a framework. So this is an initial framework. So when we talk about the AI literacy, it can be in the cognitive dimension. That is, you have some conceptual understanding. But more importantly is you don't afraid the people and the people go away. If everybody come to your course and say, I never want to learn more about AI, that will be problematic. So effective domain is you must decide a course that is with appropriate difficulties and they find rewarding in joining us. So that's why we need empowerment and we need identity. That is, you are an AI guy. So no matter where you are, where you from, you can be an AI identity. You can have that. So social cultural dimension is very emphasized by many of the people around the world when they talking about AI literacy. Although it's not a framework, many people provide some advice. That is ethical consideration. But for us, as an educator, how are you going to ask people to be ethical? It is very abstract. So we don't, how can we do that? And with a rewardful result from our students is when they do the project in a cost-free. They develop their own AI application. They always sell, this is so good. I produce this to recognize the face of a cat, and I can prevent the cat being crushed by the tram because we have all automated video alerting a cat not to go there and then stop them to go to the tram and not being crushed by the tram, by the train, right? So very good will. But do you consider if also this application go to the people who do not like cat? They can detect all the cat. What are they going to do something else other than helping them? Have you think about that? So what is ethical? The ethical means when you step into one side, you always say the good thing of one side. Do you consider the other side? So we don't talk empty words about ethical decision making. We said, if you do something you consider that's good for people, sometimes you miss the key point that it may be misused by the other people, and that is problematic. So AI is very similar. You can use AI to do a lot of good things. Example for the ChatGPT, right? They are generative, help you to write something, and you can write on that to change it. So this is the good thing. But of course, there are a lot of bad things of generative AI because you rely too much on that. And the human being will be not motivated to think if we rely totally on the AI generative tool. And that's the two sides of the story. We must make a balance between rely on a technology use, but at the same time to maintain the human intelligence is what educators should do, right? So when we talk about ethical consideration, we want to do it from the inside of every student so that they really have a true understanding, the high principle of all these applications. If there is benefit, should be evenly distributed to all the people, not only to a few people. If it is harmful, risky, it should be evenly distributed for all people involved, but not all the user become the at-risk part and all the benefit go to a few people. That is not ethical. That is the point. And if we don't voice out, it seems that only a few people are going to decide what AI, the direction should go. But why not the public to decide how to go along with the AI? So if we do not promote AI literacy, we shall be in great trouble because a few people will decide the outcome or the direction of the movement of the application of AI. That is not the way to go. So we publish using this initial framework, but recently we changed it already because we have a much deep thought about the literacy, and we go into another level of thinking. So actually research doesn't mean a static way. Of course, we need time to consolidate and work with people and try to move forward together. So the other part is about the outcome. When we say we can promote AI to everybody, is it to everybody? Do they change after attending our course? So we need some statistical. It's not very difficult. It's all about t-test, about the P and post-test, whether they become more empowered. Do they feel empowered? And do they feel they are more AI? You need to design an instrument. So we don't have the instrument. You need to build up the validity and reliability. Then I need a lot of people joining us. So we have the data and report. So when we report this result, they admit our submission immediately because no providing data support on what they claim, on what they have done. So we also go to the computers in human behavior, but they reject us. Then they not a simple reject. They said, you better go to computers in human behavior reports. That is open access. That is, I have to pay. I have to pay a lot and still very rigorous in the process. But of course, finally, I will be back to computers in human behavior once I have the data and I have a consolidated result. I will be back. So Professor Low tells you that the number of failure, yes, we always fail. And it takes 1 year for publishing. 1 year, 4 or 5 revision. I'm a chair professor already. It doesn't matter. I still have to face every day reject from the journal. So it's very common. and don't be frustrated. And go whatever you can go for publication. Do it. Work out. And my colleague said, Professor Gong, how can you be so gentleman in so many comments? My colleague said, seems not reasonable, Professor Gong. You still want to revise? I said, no, go on revision. Although you don't agree with the comment, this is very common. And even I'm the chair professor, I said, okay, bear with me. Let us work together. Then our revision is longer than the original paper, I tell you. The revision is longer. The number of words is more than the paper itself. Because some of the people who are in the field, they are not really up to date now, but they still review paper in AI. And they don't believe what we are doing. Because according to their mindset, AI is not teaching this way. You guys, what are you doing? What are you doing, people? So I said, we don't mind. Yeah, we just accept the will and try to revise the paper accordingly. So this is the way we live. It's very common. Okay, so we report. So you can see all the data are very easy for, if you're a junior researcher, you can do the t-test because this is a very start point. But yes, only t-test. But of course, we have to do the pre and post. And I don't have the control group. It's so difficult to have control group. Why people help me to do the survey without joining my course? I can't do that. So I tell you what are we going to do recently when we go to publish in a high-ranked journal. Okay, so it's difficult because when they see the t-test and they say, well, it's very simple research, don't come to me, this is a high-ranked journal, don't come. Yes, but it depends on what area we are going into. So in the so you can see this paper. Then we do the thematic analysis. If you say only t-test is to junior, how about together with some interview? Actually, we to the students, we interview them, and we do the thematic analysis that are going to analyze the data in depth and to supplement why it happened. So we can use the qualitative data to explain what is happening and why there are changes. So both making good use of qualitative and quantitative data together, then it can override the difficulties of finding a control group, and still can be very meaningful and can inform the research in this area. So you can see a lot of hard work. So you can see the diagram, but it needs 2 to 3 weeks, at least 2 manpower, because it has to be triangulated. Cannot be just Professor Low has mentioned, you cannot just decide by the only researcher. So if it's always a team, you can see always teamwork, right? All work together. Okay. So this is about the teaching method. So we use the flipped classroom method to teach. And in general, our students consider they can read the text first before they join the workshop, and that we don't waste the time, but we consider this is more effective. So now we are doing something new. For the ethical awareness, it's very difficult to evaluate. So we have developed some instruments to evaluate. And this time, because we have the project that students all together, we have a more data that can allow us to submit to a higher rank journal. So that is nearly up to date what we are doing. So we have a new dimension. I hope I can share with you for the new dimension. That is a qualitative, meta-qualitative, affective, and social dimension, and that is under review. And that go to a top journal already, because we have through 2.5 year research, we definitely are in the field and in the pioneer. And so that's why that is the end of my first part. So how many time I have? So I have 15, 20 more minutes, I think, or 15 minutes. Okay. So the second part, I think I want to involve you to know a little bit about the research opportunities in when ChatGPT is now become popular here and in Hong Kong. So if you understand the chatbot is generative and pre-trained and transformer, so all these terms are important and should have some conceptual understanding. Now, it's pre-trained. It means that if you're going to interact with the platform, you doesn't change the platform directly because it's a pre-trained model. That is, they up to now they said they use the 2021 data set that they put into the system. So if there are any changes that need another training so that they can be more powerful. So it doesn't mean that you interact with the system and you can change the system directly. No, because this is a pre-trained data. And how they generate is because of the transformer. So in terms of transformer, there are two ideas that we have to step into this large language model. That is, they are making connection among the text. Now, in simple words, and in this PowerPoint, I didn't show the self-attention mechanism, but I can tell you what is the self-attention mechanism. Actually, what the transformer doing is like this. You have a lot of text, long sentences going into the database. And because of the huge amount of text in English or in Chinese, and when they go into the system, they find out the relationship between the words, the transformer, find the relationship. But sometimes when you write a long sentence, you use it or he. And if in the whole context, you know what it referred to in the previous sentence or the he referred to which sentence. So the self-attention mechanism is to make sure you know that it is referred to what or the he is referred to what. So actually all the sentence should not be just a single sentence. I think at least a few sentences, they have connection to each other. So all the connections are made. What is the generative, the transformer? The transformer try to connect these sentences through so huge number of sentences in the new sentences and generate the new sentences to you. And sometimes when you read it, it makes sense to you. And then you said, the ChatGPT has some intelligence in response to my question. But actually, it's not intelligence. It is the transformer's algorithm making connection. If all these works are putting together, in general, they put it this way. And so put it them to you or in front of you. And you said, there is intelligence. But sometimes you said, well, they make contradictory outcome. Yes, they don't think. They don't think. This is an algorithm. They just generate something that you consider. So the the developer said, don't trust all the generated text. Please validate by yourself. So this is the way to go. So they generate something that is interesting, and so it's not error-free. It's by probabilistic. So this time you ask them, and the next time you ask them are not the same. So you always need to validate and verify. So that's the way to go. So because of the ChatGPT is working in this direction, I together with my provost, that is the next president of UHK, Professor John Lee, just in the past 2 weeks, we propose the 6P pedagogy. The 6P means, yes, we can use the ChatGPT, but please do not be passive. Now, if every human being is passive in using the ChatGPT, the whole generation will be in great trouble. Because we always, you tell me something. Please tell me. How can you always ask people to tell you what to do? As an educator, you always said student center, self-determination. You should have your own will. So we start with the plan. Please have your own view first before you prompt. So they always said prompt engineering. So people always go into the second prompt and said, we should better tell people how to prompt, and then you can get all the useful items from the ChatGPT. I say, no, you should be active. Now, the prompting means you know how to dig data in depth. Because why? Because you are an expert. So you can ask in depth, not because of the ChatGPT. It's because of you. So plan is active. Prompt, you need to be active. And you should be in the field. You can ask more in-depth questions from ChatGPT. So the prompt, who define the prompt? You are the expert. You define the prompt. Don't rely on the ChatGPT. This is my view, and this is the way to go, because we want our next generation to be smart, even more smart than the generative AI. So we should train our people like that. So preview a lot of error, you need to validate, and unfortunately, no reference generated because this is not tech. So all information are in a mess, not tech. So they don't know the source. But when you write a paper to you without reference, I don't think you can accept this is an assignment and academic writing from you, right? So you need to preview to find out the other sources that you can rely on the academic writing. So of course you can write, produce after that, and then you can peer review, and then to have portfolio checking. So plan is important. I don't track along with that, and you should know that. And why this like that? Yes, you can directly ask the ChatGPT, but I do not advocate people to always do in that way. That will make us lazy and rely on the other. So this is our will. We are the educator. So that's why we want people to plan before you prompt. And okay, prompt. Yes, you can prompt, but you are always the expert who go in the depth. Because if you have ever the experience of using ChatGPT, quite superficial. So if you ask them to write a response to something, yeah, I think it's okay. Yeah, in general, but not in the context, because they don't know you. They never can articulate the context that you are in. So they are very general when they produce something for you. So you have to go into your own context to produce the answer. So you need to preview, to validate, to find out the other resources, to do the writing, and then you can produce the academic through the ChatGPT and other resources as well. And we need a peer review. Why we want the peer review? Because the academic the guidance of our students will be very heavy. So if our students can support each other before they submit the essay writing to the academic, will be better. And especially our students learn a lot when they review their peer, the academic writing or the assignment. They learn as well. So portfolio tracking is the final part of the self-regular learning. Self-regular learning is our promoted pedagogy, because we need our students to be active in the learning process. So they have to plan. In the process, they have a lot of strategy to enrich their essay writing. And finally, the portfolio checking is to have to make a reflection on what you have gained in this writing process, at least in 1 or 2 months or 3 months time. You come up with this academic writing. So when you look back on if you ask the ChatGPT, can you extract the main text from ChatGPT and put it into the appendix when you submit your assignment to your academic? Yes, you have your own writing, but you also rely on some of the text generated by ChatGPT. Can you put it in the appendix so that the academic to take a look what is generated and what you have revised? So that become easier for the academic to rate the insight or the view of the students directly through the assignment submission. So this is an 6P pedagogy. You can download. We have a working paper we are writing now. And of course, this become a working paper. I have put it up in LTTC, in AUHK website. And I can send you the link, and you can make refer to what the working paper is working. And so this is the research possibility. So what's that? Now, if you step into this field, What can be done? Now, for academic writing, the EduHK has now, say, committed by September this year in a free credit point, we call it university portfolio. Every student before they graduate, they have to reflect on what they have learned in terms of problem solving, creativity, or critical thinking. And when they make a free credit point reflection, they can, with the guidance of the mentor, one mentor, 24 students, they can work together with the peer, and then write on the ChatGPT, see whether they can help them to make the reflection. So we want evidence from our hundreds of students before they start the course in this way, using the ChatGPT together with all other resources. And after the attending the course, do they feel they are more independent learner? We have to make the people comparison. So if I have few hundreds of university students data, I can report to the community that yes, if we can use properly in this way, our students become more independent in the learning process. So this is one possible direction of research into using ChatGPT. For senior secondary students, of course, there are many possible ways. Not academic writing, not about, because in secondary students, they don't have to make reference to the references. They don't have to follow the APA 7 format, right? Then how about when they write some argumentative writing? Can they make good use of the ChatGPT to make a more decent academic writing? So this is another possible way. For junior secondary students, yes, I purposely put another context. They can generate Python code, ChatGPT using the codex. They can create HTML. That is, if you want to earn some money by writing some HTML story, it becomes so easy that you can instruct directly and they can produce the web page. So how can we develop our junior secondary students' Python programming capability, making together with the generative codex? Can we improve their programming ability? Because we still need our students to learn programming or generate HTML, but the role has changed. So what can we do? So senior primary, I think we can work together with the teachers on storytelling. They need to learn about grammar. So can they learn something through the ChatGPT? That's possible. So is it better than not using the ChatGPT? So this a comparison study is possible. For junior primary and early childhood, is it not useful? I said it's still useful if it is about the teacher and the parent who use the ChatGPT, because you can enrich the teacher and the parent's perspective from multicultural. Because when you go to the ChatGPT, it's Australian English, it's South African English, it's a lot of other language usage. So you should be more embracive in terms of when you are embarking with the young learner. So in terms of assessment, of course, a lot of things you can try. For example, can some course allow ChatGPT in the examination room, and then the student, after working with the ChatGPT, and they make their own submission within 2 hours or 3 hours, like that, just like in the past. It can be in a physical setting to conduct a new mode of assessment, and we call it as authentic assessment. Why? Because all the people in the administrative field, in the commercial field are using ChatGPT. So this should be authentic. Why we cannot change our assessment mode? We can change it if we consider we can support our learner to be better when they graduate, more competitive. So these are the references you can refer to. So I can finish. I finished already, and I see any question from the colleagues or the students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kong. It's really interesting for me looking at this. The artificial intelligence literacy. You stop like at the primary, and I'm thinking about how the possibility related to early childhood education. That's my first question, because I'm working with STEM education, and we have also here Professor Yuli working about STEM education, and I think have the same feeling with me, like it is very interesting to see this. And we definitely gonna talk to Professor Kong about future collaboration related to this, I think. And I think I need to check. We have some text in the chat box. Is there any questions so far? And I would like to invite all the participants to give a question. You can use your chat box or unmute yourself, raise hand first, and then talk directly to Professor Kong. Or if not, I'll help you to with your question. Okay. Okay, so others have the same question, like, is it possible to use AI in early childhood education?
Now, in early childhood or in junior primary is possible. It's not directly asking the young kids, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old to use the ChatGPT directly. I don't think so. That is very dangerous. If you put the students in front of the ChatGPT when they are so young, no, please don't do that. But they have the guidance from teachers and from the parents. Now, previously, when I talk about education in the days ahead, we rely too much on the primary school or secondary school as one of the pillars. So when we send our kids to the school, parents said, that's good. They go to school already, they learn a lot. But in this AI era, the role of parents is increasing. Originally, it's the school sector. Is the pillar for education. But in the days ahead, the roles of the parent become, if the parent can spend more time for the young kid in this early stage, it depends on the parents using the ChatGPT to enrich their understanding. Because you always said the teacher should know, but now if you ask the ChatGPT, the parent can easily know a little bit more or even more. So the communication between the teachers and the parents with the generative, because this is not just not text, they can generate pictures and video and so on. It's a multimodal, multimedia. So that's why I said the parents and teachers, if they can also use the ChatGPT and all this multimodal to do the lesson preparation, the lesson can be more rich. So it depends on the professional knowledge of the early childhood teachers, and if the parents can work together with them, definitely it will benefit the young learner.
Okay, that makes sense. Not really directly implement the AI, but I think behind that, the concept of AI, like the program, the thinking, the conceptual thinking, like when you see a show about the primary student, I think it can be simplified to for early childhood. Like when we talk about the mathematical concept of data, we don't really talk about that big data to early childhood, but when we implement it through play, like who likes fried rice, who like meatballs, and then we're talking about data there. Do you see that the possibility of implementation to simplify that concept?
Yes, exactly. Now I just let you know one thing that may bomb you. In Germany, they're putting the quantum computing into the early childhood context already. They developed the curriculum. Why? Because, you know, the micro world and the physical world have different opposite view. If the younger generation can be influenced that the physical world and the micro world have different possibilities, they want to develop the young learners' mindset already. So using this tool, if the parents and the early childhood worker can understand fully the benefit and deficit of the tools, and you can influence the kids through this mediator. So definitely it can be done. So that's why I said research is important, because it's all empty. Nobody know. So that's why I said research opportunity.
Okay.
Yes. How you formulate the
Yes.
problem.
So go ahead for early childhood education. PhD student go do research in AI for early childhood education. And we go fast to the next question. How to apply machine learning in education? Can Prof. Kong give me an example of its application and how challenges machine learning to assessment in education?
Okay. Another line of research, I start with Hong Kong U and the University of Hong Kong and the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the BU as well, the Baptist University. We have 4 universities coming together to make use of machine learning. And I have a paper that's going to publish very soon. We have written that is to use the machine learning algorithm to do the to replace the regression analysis, because it can enable regression. You can identify a few factors to explain some prediction. But using machine learning, you can make a long list of predictor to predict something to happen or not to happen. And so machine learning is now step into the traditional statistical analysis. And if you're interested, we can discuss in depth and how to make good use of machine learning. Of course, you can read some articles published already is use the machine learning to make prediction with a long list of attributes. And because of the list is so long that we can understand the object more in depth. So that is a new trend, a new possibility of research using machine learning.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kong. And maybe quick answer the last question. Trending on using AI nowadays, it will make an AI literacy as core of competence that teacher have to be able, or there is possibility of the trends about, I think AI, AI will catalyze the possibility of arrangement of ICT literacy of teacher competence. Is it good topic of research? Okay, this is the idea of research. What do you think, Professor Kong, for the closing of this session?
Okay, thank you for the last question. Now for ICT is very, now I in Hong Kong, a lot of ICT teachers are using the ChatGPT. I'm very happy is that when I ask questions for the ChatGPT, all the answers from the ChatGPT, especially we have the public examination of DSE. They said they put a lot of the DSE question into ChatGPT and they can produce answer with a good explanation. Then I said, don't be happy. You will be replaced very soon. Because why the examination is so all factual oriented and the ChatGPT answer can produce an answer and explain properly. That means the ICT curriculum is problematic. You are telling all the facts. And that's why you can find all the answer properly by such a tool. You are not creative at all. If you're creative, you can find many of them have no answer. But now you find all the answer. That will be problematic. Now, that trigger another very interesting thing. Now we can use the ChatGPT to revamp our curriculum. It should not be so factual, so easy to find unique answer. That is the problem. Sorry, for ICT teachers, please be innovative.
Nice closing for ICT teachers. Please be innovative. And also for postgraduate students do research in AI, in artificial intelligence literacy. And then hopefully we can do collaboration in the future about like external examiner if the students are brave enough to or skillful enough to write in English. Do you mind?
Yeah.
That's really good. Okay. Dear participants and ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our session with all these questions answered by Professor Kong. And this is really nice session today. Very interesting about artificial intelligence literacy and also about the ChatGPT implemented in teaching and learning. And I think I will hand it over to our master ceremony today. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Kong Seshang, as our guest lecturer that has given us insight about research in AI, especially the possibilities use of ChatGPT tools in educational field. And thank you to Mrs. Ade Dwi Utami, who has been moderated the first lecture session today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving on to the second session of our general lecture today, or the third session as a whole, that will be given by Professor Trent John about thinking, planning, and doing research and the practice. To all the attendees, we will be doing 5 minutes break first. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will be moving on to the second session of our general lecture today, or the third session as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving on to the second session of our general lecture today that will be given by Professor Tran John about thinking, planning, and doing research and the practice of dissertation writing. Our moderator on this session will be Professor Yuli Rahmawati, PhD, Head of the Chemistry Education Department. To Professor Yuli, the audience is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, the Master of Ceremony. I will start this session, the last session of our visiting professors from Prof. Johnson. I will read the CV and then we will proceed to the lectures. So I will share the screen. Okay, Prof. Johnson is the professor in the Department of English Language Education. And then Dr. John joined the Hong Kong Institute of Education in 2007. And he completed his PhD and master degree at the University of Hong Kong. His recent research includes the studies of teacher identity, construction amongst native English-speaking teachers in Hong Kong, second career teachers, as well as pre-service teachers. His teaching interests include the development of classroom interaction and English across the curriculums. And then if you have looked the website and then several books, journals, and also the research project, and then I tried to select several books that he has been writing on the website that has been presenting. Is about one of them is the language teacher education multilingual context experience from the Hong Kong, and then the chapter in the edited book, it is very interesting title on the being a professor and doing MI properly isn't easy. It is about the identity theoretic investigation of content teachers attitude to EMI at the university in Hong Kong. And then if you have looked the website, there are several journal that he has been published. One of them is about the shaping of sustainable doctoral pathway, critical analysis of reflexive mediation between structure and agency in the PhD experience, and also about the promoting agentive feedback engagement through dialogically minded approach in doctoral writing supervision. And then I think it's also related to his talk today regarding the dissertation writing. And then there are two selected projects that I wrote down in my PowerPoint is this regarding the homeschool partnership to support ethnic minority student achievement in Hong Kong, and also the identity construction experience of teachers of English to young learners in mainland China. And then I think if we have looked all the publication, the research, and all the work that he has done is really related to the identity and also that in the English field. And then that's why today we would like to share his presentation on the thinking, planning, and doing research and practice of the dissertation writing. Prof. John, the times is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm not going to speak at all about that
Identity
research at all. You'll be pleased to know. I'm going to share some PowerPoints with you now, if I can get that to work. Okay. Slideshow. Is that working?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the first part of this session will probably be of more interest to those of you that may be just starting your research journey. For example, you're starting your PhD journey in research, or maybe at the master's level where you're doing a research project as part of your master's degree. And the second part may be more interesting if you're closer perhaps to the end of your dissertation journey and you're actually writing up your dissertation. And well, because of my background, if you happen to be writing your dissertation in English. That'll be my particular focus. Okay, so let's let's move on. Just a bit of contact information there. I think these PowerPoints can be available later to the students.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you
yes. So
so
we'll
much,
make these available. So let's talk a little bit about dissertations and dissertation writing. So I'll try to make it as practical as I can. So we're talking here about not one single type of dissertation. I won't be able to cover writing dissertations in all fields. And you need to keep in mind that writing, say, in a scientific field or mathematics or engineering will be quite different from a dissertation in the humanities, in history or literature, for example. So it's therefore important that despite what I say today, you work very closely with your supervisor who is able to guide you specifically in your area of writing. So that's very important. So today I'm only going to be talking in very general terms about dissertation writing, and specific questions would need to be directed to your supervisors. So I'd like to get a few of you involved now. If you can think about the structure of a dissertation. We'll start at the very broad level. And what I'd like you to do is just think about that for a few minutes. And if you can put some ideas into the chat box, can we get the chat box to work?
Sure. I will follow.
So I've done one for you. So typically, if you're writing a dissertation, you'd have an introduction. And what are the other general chapter headings that you might expect to find as you're writing a dissertation? Now, of course, there's not one correct answer. It does vary across different disciplines. But if you'd like to take a guess, what do you think would come next generally in the structure of a dissertation? What would chapter 2 look like? So I'm asking you now, if you can type something into the chat box, if we can see that.
Yeah.
Can we see that?
Yeah, sure.
The flies
Probably I
are
will.
going to attack me here. Okay.
Okay, probably I will ask
So
the
I'm from
audience.
Australia.
Yeah.
I'm used to flies. It's okay.
Okay, so everyone, if you can type on the chat box, probably what is your dissertation? I mean, the chapter 2, chapter
What do you
3,
think?
4. What do you think about the title?
Yeah,
topic,
of the
or-
chapter. Yeah.
of the chapter.
What would be a title for chapter 2? What would come in chapter 3? Generally, in general terms, what sort
Okay.
of things do we need to think about at that broad level of a
Yeah.
dissertation?
Ya, silakan Bapak Ibu dituliskan di chat Zoom ya. Jadi chapter bab 2 sampai bab 6 itu kira-kira apa judulnya dan sebagainya. Silahkan ditunggu. Okay, they just write it down. Okay. Yeah, probably anyone who at the moment write the dissertation or in the early
You want me to
stage.
do it?
Yeah.
You want me to do it? Okay. Is that easier? All right. Well, I was going to put some ideas in the chat box, but that's okay. So generally, what we might expect to find is something like that. And this actually goes across languages. It doesn't matter if you're writing up your dissertation, I would imagine, in Bahasa Indonesia or English or any other language. This is sort of a typical type of dissertation structure. So you need to think about each one of those before you begin at the broadest sort of macro level. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those as we go through. But again, there's not absolutely one approach. It can vary. So don't take that as the only possibility for your dissertation structure. For example, you might have several different studies, particularly if you're doing a dissertation in a scientific area or maybe engineering. You may have several different studies, and you might report those results over 2 or 3 different chapters. So that's another structure. So I just put that in there to illustrate that. And on the previous slide, there was more than one possibility. So when we talk about the structure of a dissertation, we have this idea of it being an hourglass. As you begin your dissertation journey, you start very broad with a topic, and then you start to narrow it down. So you see in the middle that it becomes quite narrow as you look at the literature in your area. You have a particular methodology and findings which apply to your area. And then why does it become broader again at the end? Well, the answer to that is that you then go and apply your findings or your results. I'm using those terms, results and findings, interchangeably. One can be replaced by the other. You go back and apply that to the general literature, to what other people have found. And you talk about what you have found, which is new, or you might be talking about confirming some results from previous studies. So generally, when we talk about the structure of a dissertation, we begin with the introduction, although in terms of the writing process, often the introduction is the last thing that we write. It sounds rather strange, but that's commonly one of the last things we write. And one of the things that we always encourage our students to do when they're writing their dissertation is to include your research questions or your hypotheses in that introductory chapter. What we've found is that often examiners, readers of your dissertation can get rather frustrated if those hypotheses or those research questions come very late in the dissertation. Like you could do a very long literature review, chapter 2. It could be 70 or 80 pages before your actual examiner, your reader, gets to see what your study is doing. So I always encourage my students to include their research questions, their hypotheses early in the dissertation, in that introduction. You can repeat them again later, at later stages of the dissertation, but you need to clarify for your reader, for your examiner of a dissertation, exactly what your project is about. We don't want the examiner to have to wait until page 85 to figure out exactly what you are doing. So that's something to perhaps to keep in mind. And then we have, of course, the literature review. And often in that chapter, we'll include our theoretical framework, or we may borrow a theoretical framework from somewhere in the literature and apply that to our study, or we might develop our own. But generally, at a PhD level, and particularly at master's level, if you're doing dissertations at master's level, we would generally apply an existing framework to our study. And then, of course, comes our methodology section where we talk about data collection, data analysis. And I'm going to go in a little bit more detail later. I'm still operating at a broad macro level at the moment, and talking about how we collected the data, what we collected will come later. But these are really explaining to the reader the steps that we followed in recruiting participants, how we collected the data, why we collected that type of data, and how we conducted the study. And then, of course, we present our results. Often where I come from in the qualitative research area, that will include quotations from interviews we've done with our participants. And it could be in education area, it could be examples of classroom observation that you've done as part of your dissertation. In quantitative dissertations, it might be the results of your statistical tests and your if you did an intervention study, the results of that. And then we move on to the discussion. And this is where some of our beginning students struggle a little bit in Hong Kong in terms of telling or understanding the difference between the results and the discussion chapter. Now, when we come to the discussion chapter, what we're really doing there is not presenting any new data. We are not presenting new data in the discussion chapter. That would have been done in the results chapter. So this chapter is really about going back to your research questions. I'll use research questions because I come from a qualitative background. So basically, I'm basically using research questions. I know in quantitative research, you may use hypotheses, but equally the same can apply to hypotheses and quantitative studies. That we go back and we talk about how our data answered our research questions. So how our data, the data we reported in the results chapter or the findings chapter, how does that answer our research question? So this will be predominantly in our own words. So again, it would, and when I say our own words, it could be in Bahasa Indonesia, it could be in English, it could be in any language. This sort of stretches across all languages. It doesn't matter. And then we may also want to compare our results to previous results in the literature. And that's where we would do this also in the discussion chapter. And then, of course, that brings us to the conclusion. And what do we put in our conclusion? Well, again, typically, we might summarize the project, give a brief summary of what we found. It's important to recognize the limitations of your study. Every study has limitations, and I always tell my students to acknowledge those in the final chapter, because what you want to avoid, what you do not want to happen, is the examiners pointing out the limitations to you. For example, in qualitative research, we may only have, in fact, in narrative research, we may only have one participant. We can collect data from one participant, but we can't claim that those results will apply to all learners, for example, if we're talking about an educational context. I can show you other dissertations, not narrative research, but qualitative research, which has 4 or 5 participants in a qualitative study. So again, we can't apply that. We can't say all learners or all teachers, if we're investigating teachers. This would apply to all of those. We can't make those sort of generalizations in qualitative research. So we need to be aware and acknowledge the limitations, and also from that make some suggestions or recommendations for further research. What could future research do to expand on this study? What would you do next, for example, as a follow-up study? You may collect data from more participants. You may collect data in a range of different schools, colleges or universities, depending on the context of your study. And then also you might want to make some, in that final chapter, or sometimes this appears in the discussion chapter, it can vary, but some recommendations that arise from your results. Recommendations here, I mean recommendations for policy, for government policy, for teaching practice, if that's relevant to your study, for learners, for students, again, if that's relevant. But again, most importantly, of course, in the conclusion, we're not going to introduce new data. We've done that already. So nothing new in the conclusion. We don't want the examiner to think, oh, wait a minute, where did that come from? This is new data. This is new information to me. So we don't want that to happen. Okay. Sometimes, of course, we can, in some dissertations, you may see the results and the discussion combined in one chapter, but I think it's more common that we separate those two. That would be more common. But again, ask your supervisors, supervisory team for advice in that area. And of course, there are other, variations that are that are possible. So let's step back a little bit now and just talk a little bit about what is this thing called research. And again, as I mentioned, this may be more relevant to you at the beginning. Those of you who are at the beginning of your research journey, maybe you're in year 1 or into year 2 of your research. There's an old, this is rather old book now, but still quite interesting and relevant, I think. It's, I'm not sure if you've seen this one before. It's called, what is this thing called? Science. Now, even though it has the name science in it, it's not a scientific book. It's not only for scientists. It's talking about research method and research, the philosophy of research in general. So it's not a how to do book. It's not a how to do research book, but it'll give you a lot of background into the philosophy of science and beyond science, how research in general is conducted. It's a bit old now, but quite useful, I think. And the cat looks happy. So, okay. I want you to maybe, again, I'll do this to save a little bit of time. We won't do it on the chat box, but research is, maybe you just take, say, 10 seconds to think about that. What does research mean to you? You don't have to write anything. Maybe you just keep it to yourself. What does research mean to you? In other words, trying to finish that.
So everyone, if you can think about 10 seconds about what is research, and then you can share with us.
It's okay, don't
yeah.
have to. I think it'll take a long time to get the chat box. And
Okay.
yeah.
So do you want to say
I will
something?
do it. Just
Okay.
think. Just think. But you're welcome to say something. Yes, if you want to.
Anyone?
Research is
What is research? Bapak Ibu, research is Vivi, Bu Vivi, Mbak Vivi.
You can turn on the audio as well if you wish
Yeah.
to. Your microphone.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to
Mbak
be the
Vivi
chat
mau
box.
say something? Apa itu research?
In the past, some of my students said research is difficult. That's the
Research
end of it.
is
difficult.
research is difficult. Oh,
Yeah, full stop.
oh yeah, because the host not allow participant.
Oh, okay,
to,
all right. Oh, okay,
so
okay.
they put on the chat box. Some
Ah.
of them say like research is related to the method. Some of them say like research mean research, doing the
Yeah,
research.
that's a good point. Yes, the in research.
Yeah, re and search.
Yes.
And then on the chat box, they mention also the organized systematic method of finding answers to the questions.
Yes, to questions.
Yeah.
Systematic. There are two important words there.
Yeah.
You know, systematic and questions. So let's have a look at a couple of definitions then. I'll come back to those issues of questions and systematic very soon. Have a look at that. I won't read it to you. You read it yourself.
Yeah.
Good point about making a presentation when you're teaching. Don't read your PowerPoints to your students. Right? To your students if you're teaching.
Teach our students.
In academia, when you become an academic, when you finish your PhD and you join a faculty, so you'll be teaching. You have to teach. Part of the job. The worst thing you can do is read PowerPoints to them. Your students will fall asleep. So I'm going to let you read that. But notice there the information there in that quote has an emphasis on new knowledge. So research is something about creating something new. And it doesn't have to be some sort of incredible breakthrough.
Yeah.
So for example, one idea about new knowledge is that you may have found when you're looking at your literature that a lot of studies in your area have been done in particular contexts, like let's say they've been done in Western countries. So you might find a lot of literature done in studies done in the United States, in Australia, or the UK, New Zealand, and so on. But you may find that there's very little research in your area done here in Indonesia. So you might want to think about doing a similar study, but looking at, do we get the same results when we look at schools, when we look at learners, when we look at teachers in Indonesia? That is new. That is new, right? And we come back to that very good point. Somebody made that very good point. I'm not sure who it was, but thank you for looking at that the RE part of that word research. So we're redoing things, but we're contributing, we're adding new knowledge. And A lot of our beginning students think that they have to make these huge breakthroughs. They have to come up with something incredibly new, incredibly different that's going to change the world. No, right? In 99.999% of cases, that is not going to happen. That is not going to happen. So don't be too ambitious. It'll just put too much pressure on you. Be realistic. Research generally, in general, proceeds incrementally. And what I mean by incrementally is using small steps. We take a small step forward. We contribute in a way, in generally in a small way, but making that connection between results and comparing results in, say, the United States or the UK, Australia, and so on, comparing that with the results we get, say, in doing a very similar study in Indonesia is a contribution. That can be new. You can say, well, the results are similar in Indonesia. The results are different. We get different results with teachers here, or we get different results with our students here in Indonesia. So don't think that new means you have to make an incredible breakthrough that's going to win you the Nobel Prize. It's not going to happen generally. Okay. All right. And we also want to point out the gaps that exist. And I pointed out one of the gaps that exist in current knowledge just now. What was that? One of the gaps is that maybe research has been done in Western countries, but very little research done in Indonesia. Or maybe if you can find some work which is done in Indonesia in a school context, maybe it was done with older learners, high school students or college, university students. But maybe there's been little research done with younger students. So that might be an area that you could consider as a research gap. So that's important to consider as well. Why do the research? Now, there is a study done several years ago now that asked this to teachers across the world. Why do you do research? And here are some of their reasons. Again, I won't read them to you. You can have a quick look through it. I guess in your case, if you're enrolled in a PhD program or a master's program, yes, you have to. You have no choice. It's part. If you want to graduate, if you want to get your PhD or you want to complete your master's degree, you have to do it. There's no choice. But there are, of course, other reasons. You know, you're expected to do the research. You might like to find out a better way of teaching if you're already teaching in a school context to solve some problems in your field and so on. Here's an interesting diagram. It's got a few boxes there. You'll notice at the center of this is called the research process. We call this the research process. And it's circular, and you've got lots of arrows with double-headed. They're going one way and going the other way. And at the center is our research question. Or if you're doing quantitative research, it would be your hypotheses or hypothesis. We've got some blank boxes there. I'll give you another 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Think about what other things do we need to put in there as part of that research process? What else would go in there? So we've got a research question. We've got some background. Maybe the background is something we studied on a course, a topic that we were interested in, and we want to pursue it in more detail at the PhD level. It might be something that occurred to us in our professional context as teachers. It might be something that we encountered as learners that we want to solve a problem. For example, learning a language or learning some scientific, in some scientific or engineering field. So that's our background. What else do we need to do when we're doing research? Remember, the topic is today, is part of the topic at least, is doing research. What else do we need, do you think? Just think about those. What would go in the other boxes? Or maybe we could go just briefly back to the chat box if you have any ideas.
Kan Bapak Ibu untuk mengisi yang di box itu ya.
Just one or two words.
Ya, satu atau dua kata. di dalam box itu kira-kira apa isinya. Itu Prof John already wrote the background, and then how about the other box? You can put on the chat box in the Zoom. What else in the box? It can be one or two words.
What else do we need when we're
They
thinking
mentioned
about
about the selection of.
Oh, you gave it. Yeah. All right. There it is.
Yeah, you can click on the
Chat.
the chat. Yes.
Oh, I
This
see.
all they mentioned what the research.
Oh,
what
yes.
is research and so on.
Oh, research
Methods,
methods. Yes,
yeah.
thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what we want. Yeah, research methods is certainly one of them.
I just
Okay.
typed in
Yeah.
research method.
Yeah.
Selection of this, research method.
And selection of those methods. Let's
Yeah.
have another look at my
Yeah,
completed diagram.
how to collect the data. Okay.
Yep, there it is.
Data collection.
So we need to
yeah.
think about literature review. We need to think about designing our research. Is it going to be
Literature review, yeah.
qualitative, quantitative, or some mixture,
Mm.
mixed methods? You may have heard of that term. How are we going to collect our data?
Mm.
How are we going to analyze our data? And of course, our report is our final dissertation.
Mm.
We've got to write up a dissertation, submit that for examination. Notice that the research question is at the center, or questions, could be plural, or your hypotheses. It's at the center because that guides everything else
Yeah,
you do.
I agree.
That's very important. That bit there is really important. That guides your hypotheses or your research questions, guide everything you will do. It will determine what literature you read and review. You can't read and review everything in your dissertation. You can't review everything if you're looking, for example, at, chemistry. To take your area, chemistry. You
Yeah.
can't review the whole history of chemistry. You can't review the whole history of chemistry. You have to focus in on one area within that topic, and your design, your research questions will determine if you're going to do qualitative, quantitative, or, as I said, maybe both in mixed methods. So, for example, if you want to know, if you're a teacher, researcher, and you want to know what your students think about your new method of teaching, and it doesn't matter whether you're teaching chemistry, physics, history, geography, language, whatever, you've got a new method of teaching you want to implement or you want to put into practice. If you want to know what they think about it, what are their feelings about it, you cannot give them an exam. An exam will never tell you what they actually think about it. You see the point I'm making? So you need to ask them. You need to do a qualitative research topic methods, which would involve perhaps doing an interview or a survey questionnaire. So that's going to decide how you collect data, how you analyze the data. So it's very important that you work closely with your supervisor or supervisors to design your research questions. And that's going to be done relatively early. That's going to be done relatively early in your study. Now, the research questions may be changed. They're flexible. We are flexible in research, of course. So there may be changes as you go along. You may want to come back and modify your questions, change them a little bit as you go along, but you need to have something to guide you throughout the process. Okay, so what are some of the key questions in planning your research? Anything else we should sort of think about? Here are suggestions. And again, I'm not going to read them to you, but you can have a quick look down the list. Of course, topic, you'll start with a topic. What gaps? We talked a little bit about research gaps. What's missing from the existing knowledge from the literature? And I gave you the example of doing a study based in, so for example, Indonesia. And then, of course, how you're going to analyze the data and so on. So there's a list of things there that we can think about. So doing research is complex, okay? Doing research is complex. And just have one or two examples today. For example, you need to think about how and what type of data you'll collect. And let's look at this data collection process. You think about, well, it's pretty easy. I'll just go out and interview some students, in the education field, or I'll just go out and interview some teachers in the school, see what they're doing, see what they're thinking. But let's have a look at some of the questions you might want to think about. Let's say you're going to do interviews. And this is very common in qualitative interviews. And you might, of course, involve it might involve just two individuals, you and one of your participants. Or you might have group events. So you're going to do individual interviews or focus group interviews? That's a question to consider. You know, what might be the advantages of using a focus group interview, for example? You know, there's a few, there's a few possible advantages in that list of using focus groups. That's one thing to think about. Am I going to interview my participants individually? Am I going to interview them in groups? But of course, there's another side to that, and that is that there are some disadvantages of using focus groups to collect your data through interviews. Some people, of course, may be concerned about confidentiality. They might not want to discuss certain issues in front of their colleagues or other learners, other students, and so on. So there are some disadvantages of focus group interviews. Another example is another question that you might want to think about. How am I going to record my interviews? Am I going to be able to audio record them, video record them? Or am I going to just take notes? Some people don't like being recorded. Some participants don't like having, teachers don't like having their lessons recorded. So you need to think about how you're going to record your data, maybe just note taking if audio or video recording is not possible. You know, you can have all sorts of issues, non-verbal communication, also eye contact, all of these things to think about when you're sitting down and interviewing a person. Or these days, maybe you're doing an interview on Zoom, or you're talking with some teachers in a faraway part of Indonesia. You might want to do it simply on Zoom. Then you miss some of that non-verbal communication that can be picked up during an interview. So that's another issue to think about. And you'd need to discuss that in your dissertation if you only did interviews via Zoom, for example. Although you can see the other participant, you can't see maybe all of their non-verbal communication. So that's part of the questioning process that you need to think about. And how are you going to record the and transcribe the interview in complete terms, or are you going to be selective? So after you come back, you finish the interview, are you going to transcribe everything? In other words, you're going to listen to the interview again and then write down all the words in your Word document, or are you just going to be selective? So I'm doing this because I just want to show you that research is complex. It looks simple. Oh, I'll go out and interview some teachers. I'll ask them a group of questions, and that's easy. But it's more complicated. It's much more complicated than you think. You know, recording might make people anxious. Transcription takes a very long time. Very, very long time if you're doing qualitative research. You might choose, do I choose note taking? Well, again, as I say there on the slide, there are positive aspects to that, and there are negative aspects to that, and I've highlighted those there. Again, I'm not going to read it to you, but again, to underscore this idea that I'm trying to get across today is that at every stage of the research process, there are some very complicated issues that you need to consider. Nothing is as easy as it looks in research. There's always these underlying, sometimes hidden, sometimes not visible issues to consider. So if I summarize what I've said so far, don't underestimate how complex it's going to be. Every step in that diagram, if you remember the diagram with circles, we had data collection, data analysis, designing research questions, our background, our report writing, everything needs a lot of thought. Every step along the way requires a lot of thought. let's, so that's sort of an overview of research. And because our time is limited, what time am I supposed to finish? 11:30? No, I probably, okay, all right. Yeah, I'll go for another 15 minutes or 20 minutes, yep. So let's talk a little bit about language now. So I'm going to, well, because of obviously my background, I'm going to talk a little bit about the practice of dissertation writing in English. So if you have to write your dissertation in English, this will be, I think, more relevant to you. So we talked a little bit already about what is research. We can just summarize that. And then I'm going to look at writing an introduction. Again, I'm going to just really just skim the surface of this. So again, I emphasize that this is very important to discuss this with your supervisor or supervisory team. I'm then going to move on and talk a little bit about hypotheses and research questions from a language point of view. So I'm moving now into a language focus in this part. How do I refer to the work of others, which will be important if you're writing your literature review? Well, you have to write your literature review. That's compulsory in any dissertation. Sometimes beginning researchers struggle with the idea of being critical of others. How do I do that? We want to be polite, we want to be respectful, but on the other hand, just because it's published in a journal or a book chapter, just because it's been published doesn't mean it's beyond our criticism, doesn't mean that we cannot find limitations in that data. And we'll talk a little bit about how to write in a way which doesn't offend people. And this is quite important if you're at the beginning of your research process, the beginning of your dissertation, because if there are some very influential people in your field, they may end up being your examiners. Or you might later, when you're working, might want to have some research collaboration with these people. So it's fine to be critical. That's fine, but we need to do it in a way which is respectful and courteous. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit about writing up the findings and the results, and then concluding your dissertation. So basically, what I've done so far is looked at each of those sections broadly, and now we'll look in a little bit more detail at each of those from an English language, I should say, point of view. So writing the introduction. So again, I'll give you 15 seconds. Think about what is the purpose of the introduction. You don't have to, I don't think you need to necessarily write something in the chat box, or you're welcome. No, you can't join us through the audio, but if you do have anything to say in the chat box, that will be good. What is the purpose? What do you want to do in that first chapter? And again, this is not really an English. This part is at least is not really a question of the English language. Again, if you're writing your dissertation in Bahasa Indonesia, again, you would need to do this in any introduction to a dissertation. I'm not sure we have it. Oh, we have some. Yes. What is the purpose? Okay. Yeah. Oh, you did that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
To show the research, they already respond on the chat.
Oh, somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To
Yeah. Show the research.
Why?
Why the research is needed. Yes, that's it. That's a very good point. Thank you. Yeah. So we want to establish why our research is important. Sometimes in dissertations, in the introduction, you'll see a short section called the significance of the research. The significance. Why is your research worth doing? Why is it important? What do you think it's going to contribute to knowledge? Yeah. To see the glance of our research problem. Yeah. To have a quick look at the research problem, quick look at the research questions, and give a general overview. I always encourage my students to keep, particularly in a qualitative field, to keep the introduction short. Keep it short. Just get somebody's attention. And how are you going to get your reader's attention? What's a good way to get your reader's attention? Well, readers, examiners would be interested in firstly seeing that there is some gap in our knowledge. This is why we talk a little bit about research gaps. We talk about this very often, and we talk about it early in our dissertation. So what's missing? And I gave you one example. It's only one example of doing research here in Indonesia, which has never been done in Indonesia. It may have been done in Western countries, but never in this context. So you're making a contribution. Younger learners, older learners, experienced teachers versus less experienced teachers. There's all sorts of ways that you can find a research gap. And one of the things I tell my students is another good place to think about the research gap is to look in published articles, books, book chapters, because at the end of that chapter or the book or the journal article, often the author will point out some implications or suggestions for future research. So often a writer will say future research should be done with younger learners, or future research should be done with more experienced teachers, because in this study, I only looked at novice or beginning teachers. So that's a good place to find research gaps. And you can say, well, this person, you can cite that person, that study, and there might be others. More is better, generally. You can say, well, other people in the field, other researchers who have published in this area say that we need more studies with younger learners or older or more experienced, less experienced teachers. Okay, so that's another place to find your research gap. Have a look when you're reading and going through the literature. Okay, let me just close this now. So, yes, as you said, making the reasons why you're doing this research clear. So that needs to be established very early in the process. So let's look at an analogy, sort of an example, non-research example, to show why this is important. So think of the introduction as a building. Think of it as a building. Okay, you might think of it as this building. This is a nice building, isn't it? This is a nice building. Yes, this is a nice building. And it's here. It's built already. So it's like our current knowledge. Our current knowledge. But maybe you think, oh, the building might be looking a little bit old. The building might be needing some changes. Maybe it would be nice if we had a swimming pool on the roof. Can we do that? Can we talk to the rector about putting a swimming pool on the roof for the students to use? Or, yeah, so you might like that. You might think, oh, that's good. So in other words, what we're doing, coming back to research though, is what we're doing is we're saying the current knowledge needs some renovation. It needs some extension. It needs a little bit more development to make it look better. Okay, and what you're doing in your project is coming in and doing those renovations, making those extensions, making the current knowledge, the building look better. And you don't have to tear the whole building down. We're not going to destroy the building. We're not going to destroy all current knowledge. If we're looking at this building, we may simply just paint the room and it makes it look brighter. It makes it look better. It makes it look different. But it's not a huge change, right? We can just paint the room and it will be maybe brighter, better. That's your current knowledge in your field. And you're doing a little bit of renovation, addition, or extensions, whatever word you want to use. But first of all, we have to describe the building. How would you describe this building? Well, you talk about its features, what we know about it, and you do the same thing in your field. What do we know about your topic? What have other people done already in your field? But then, of course, we come to the limitations. Like I said before, maybe we need new paint. Maybe we need some new flooring. Maybe we need some new furniture. Same thing in your research area. We need a bit more information about what you think are the limitations of the current knowledge and of the building and your research area, and how you're going to make it better, how you're going to modify it. So in research terms, the limitations would be called the research gap. The limitations of the building, the shortcomings of the building, would be called your research gap. And then you talk about how you're going to help to fill that research gap. Okay, so introductions often follow 4 steps, which I'll tell you about to save a little bit of time. There they are, 4 steps to a typical introduction. We describe the problem. We briefly explain what's already known, and we're going to come back. We're going to come back later in our dissertation in chapter 2, where we look at the research from the point of view of existing literature. We're going to expand on that, but we briefly say what we know about the topic. We say what is not known, that's the research gap, and how will we contribute to filling the gap. And towards the end of the chapter, we may often give a roadmap, what some people call a roadmap of the rest of our dissertation. So we'll have a short section at the end of the introduction saying, chapter 2 will do this. Just a few sentences. Chapter 3 will do something, whatever it's going to do. In chapter 4, and so on. So you briefly give an overview of the entire dissertation. Okay. And you can do that using what we call meta discourse. It's a common word these days, meta, but it has nothing to do. Nothing to do with AI or the metaverse, isn't it? The metaverse. Maybe Professor Kong knows more about that than I do. You know metaverse? No, we're not talking about metaverse. Don't get excited, all right? But if you have questions about metaverse, you ask Professor Kong, not me. We're talking about meta discourse. I'm a language person. So often we'd say in the end of that chapter 1, the thesis argues that, or chapter 2 will examine this. The following section reviews. So we've got to get away from everyday English or everyday language. Again, Bahasa Indonesia, Japanese, English, whatever you're using. We've got to get into this sort of academic writing mode, this academic writing speak, if you like, because that's what our examiners are going to be looking for. Oops, sorry. And when we're previewing in that final part of chapter 1, we might use words like this thesis, this study, often beginning with a noun. And this is often followed by different verbs, and I've got a whole bunch of them there for you to think about. So you could talk about, at the end of this chapter 1, this thesis describes, or my thesis develops, discusses, examines. There's all those sort of words. So that's the general structure of academic writing in terms of introducing and previewing what you're going to be studying and reporting on in this one. Okay, let's move on though to hypotheses and research questions. So should we have a hypothesis or research question? I think I've already covered this a little bit. Which one or both? Of course, I already talked about the fact that it depends really on what type of research you're doing. So in quantitative research, we would often have hypotheses, and we're looking at relationships, directional relationships that can be tested using empirical evidence. So we often have that type of structure in quantitative research. For example, we may have a statement like that. And in qualitative research, we usually use research questions, as I said before. So coming back to the drug example, we don't know the side effects of drug X. So if we're doing it from a qualitative point of view, we may simply ask our participants in the study, what are the side effects of this drug, this new drug that we might be trialing in a scientific study. So again, qualitative research, generally, we would have research questions. Quantitative, we would generally have hypotheses. And of course, if you're using mixed methods, you may have some combination of the two. Okay, and just a note on research questions. When you're writing your research questions, the word question is important. It's actually a question. Do you see the difference between the purple and the blue? What's different in terms of language? Well, the second one, the blue one, is not a question. And some beginning researchers in their introduction present the blue one as their research question. It might be the title. It might be the title, but it's not a question. So from a language point of view, it starts with a question word, WH, or how, or one of those, what, and where, and so on. And it ends with a question mark. So make sure it's really a question, not a statement. Okay. And why is it important to get it right? Well, because you've got to get your research questions correct, because they're at the center of everything you do. They are at the center of everything you do. Okay, let's talk briefly about, again, we won't use the chat box, but I'd like to think a little bit about why we refer to the work of others. Why do we refer to the work of others? Well, one of them is to avoid plagiarism. That's important. Because we want to acknowledge our ideas. We want to acknowledge the source of our ideas that we're drawing upon. Because I can guarantee you, no matter what area you've been in or you're going to enter into as a researcher, somebody at some point would have done something. They might not have done exactly what you're doing, but there will be related areas that you draw upon. There will be literature out there somewhere. It might not be exactly in your area, but it will be related to that, and you'll need to review that and really show. Oh, somebody's drawing up on my, that's okay. You can, oh, I've got it now on every slide. You have to rub that. Can you rub that out? That's all right. That's all right. No, that's all right. Clear all the drawings. Yep. It was a good contribution. That's okay. Might have been important. Maybe we should bring it back, emphasize something. Now, the other one, of course, is that you want to show the reader, another reason for reviewing literature, you want to show the reader that you're familiar with what's been done already. And it's very important to be up to date. That's important, being up to date in your literature review. If this was in a dissertation, look at the sentence there, beginning with the word Littlewood. If this came to me in a dissertation now, and this was the most recent citation, 2002. It's more than 20 years old. More than 20 years old. So an examiner would ask, well, hang on, what happened after 2002? What's happened since then to our knowledge? So be very aware of the fact that your literature review needs to look up to date. It needs to look up to date. So you need to think about finding literature in your area that's been published recently, 2020, 21, 22, 19, 18. Sometimes I encourage my students to start with the recent and then work your way back. You don't have to go all the way back to 1975 or 1960, unless it's a very, very important study in your area. It's much better if you summarize and can summarize what's been done in the last 5, 10 years. Then your literature review looks up to date. And then, of course, we might want to evaluate. You might disagree with some of the findings in the research. You might agree. You might say, yes, this is an important study, an important result, and now I'm going to look at the same study or very similar study in the Indonesian context. And let's have a look at an example, okay, from a dissertation. And which word here is a positive evaluation? Remember, when we sort of critically review, people think it's always criticism of others, but it's not. It's not always criticism. That could be part of it, but we also want to acknowledge the positive contributions from others. And then, of course, it's the word convincing. Okay, look at that word there, convincing. So we're positively reviewing as well as being critical of other previous research. But of course, we might also want to indicate limitations. Have a quick read of that very quickly and see which words do you think there indicate that there are some limitations. What words did the writer of this dissertation use to signal or to show that there are some limitations to the that study by Smith? Okay, so you might have thought about that for a little while. So this writer says did not explain and uses the word however. So however, this study by Smith did not explain something. So we are quite within our rights to be critical of published research as long as we do it in a respectful way, in an academic way. And I'll talk about that very briefly in a few minutes. And of course, you might want to support your own findings. So have a look at the example at the bottom of the screen. So you might have done the results, say, in Hong Kong. I'm using a Hong Kong example here. And you support those findings that you have reported with some previous research. So you are confirming, and your results are confirmed by some earlier research in the field. So again, that's important. We don't have to have this brand new breakthrough all the time. It's very important to also confirm research that's done before as well. And then number 5, of course, is to create that research gap or research space. This is why we review the literature, to say, hey, nobody's done a study like this in Indonesia. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in and do that. Okay, let's talk about referring to the work of others. What type of language can we use? Okay, so we want to show that we're familiar, firstly, with the literature. Let's have a look. We're running a little bit short of time, so I want to leave a little bit of time for question and answer. So I'll just go through this very quickly. So to show that you're familiar with the literature, you might use words like noted, Brown noted that children under the age of 2 and so on, or Lee stated that even children as young as 8 and so on. So we use those type of words when we're just showing the reader that we are familiar. We've read this, we've been to the literature. We don't want the examiner to say, oh, you forgot this very important study by Lee, for example. So we're familiar with it or pointed out. That's another one that we could use in the blank space there. Okay. Maybe some debate in the literature continues. It's ongoing. It's not settled. So I'll come back to Professor Kong's example, AI. The debate is not settled. Some people claim it's good. Some people state that it's not so good. So in language terms, we can use those type of words in color at the bottom there. Some people maintain that AI is very helpful. Other people believe that it's not. So the debate is ongoing. It's not settled. So they're the type of words that we might use there. We might want to take a position on something. I can just make it. So again, we might want to think about which word here, which is more certain, which statement is more certain in our dissertation. Statement number 1 or number 2, if we were writing that as a student in our dissertation. So I think you might agree that number 2 is more certain. So yeah, so we compare words like asserts, which is a strong word, with a weaker word, which is like suggests. Okay. And of course, you can do the translation into Bahasa Indonesia. I mean, if you're writing in Bahasa Indonesia, you can find similar words, strength, stronger words and weaker words. Okay, so you can, even though I'm presenting in English and making reference to English examples, the same thing applies in your language. It's not specific to English, although my examples are. You can certainly do the translation. In English, the often in spoken language, everyday language, out on the street there, we might say the word "say" quite a lot. This is not something that we often find, though, in academic writing. And I was talking a little bit about moving from that sort of everyday language into academic writing. We don't often see in our literature reviews and our papers that we publish that Wong said that students, for some reason, as academics, we think that it's maybe a little bit too informal, maybe a little bit too conversational. So we come up with more fancy words. We could replace said with stated. Wong believes, Wong argued, Wong maintains, and so on. So we like to be a little bit fancy, I guess, in our academic writings. What about being critical of others? This is something that we might want to do. So what we talk about in being critical of others, we look at the word that's highlighted there, hedge. Have you heard of hedging before? Again, I'm sure you have equivalents in Bahasa Indonesia, but I'm going to, of course, refer only to English examples. So which of the words in the following two would be hedging words? Which sort of hedging, what do hedging words do? Well, they soften our criticism. They reduce the strength of our criticism. Like in the first one there that starts with Smith. Look at the last line. The last line. And look at the word appears. Now, I use that word appears there because it softens my criticism. It's not definite. We're not saying that Smith definitely overlooked the factors, because somebody might come along, Smith might come along and say to you, I did not overlook. You misread my paper. That can happen. But for the purposes of today, we want to soften our criticism. So we use words like hedging. In the second example there in the sentence where it uses the word seems. Do you see that? Seems, yep. Okay, so there are the two examples, appears and seems. I'll move on a little bit quickly. And then if we take away those hedging words, our conclusions become much stronger, our statements become much stronger. That might seem to be a good thing, but the limitation of that, or the danger of that, is that we overstate, we get it wrong. So sometimes it's better to be a little bit less certain in our writing. And another thing we can do is balancing. So I want to move on. There are three examples there. I'll go to the next slide. I'll let you have a look in more detail at the next slide, okay? Because we're running a little bit short time. Yeah, but yep. Okay, I'll go very quickly. So we balance some criticism and some positive statements as well. Some criticism in the red there, and some more positive statements in the other color. So maybe we'll balance our writing a little bit. Okay, writing up your findings chapter. Usually past tense, most common. The pre-test, it was discovered. Why? Because we've already done the research. If we're writing our research proposal, we'd use mainly future tense. But again, you can have the equivalent in Bahasa Indonesia. Am I correct? Yeah. Yeah. Right. One or two words in the middle. But you've already done the research. You're reporting results which have been already done. So past tense. Right. So again, we use that hedging and tentative. We like to be a little bit modest in our claims. We're not going to claim to solve every problem for students or for teachers. We want to be fairly modest and limited, and you might be wrong. Okay. Okay. So again, hedging. So again, I hedged there in that example. I used words like a phrase like seems to be established, but not is established, but seems to be. So I'm softening my claims as well as my criticism. I'm softening or reducing what I'm claiming to have done in this study. Okay. The results suggest that this might be or may be, again, softening. Okay, let's move quickly on to the conclusion, which is going to bring us to an end. And again, we had the introduction with 4 steps. Well, we have the conclusion. What are the 4 steps that we often see in a conclusion? There they are. There they are. Summarizing very briefly. Again, our conclusion is a short paragraph, a short chapter, a paragraph on summarizing, usually 1 or 2 paragraphs. What's your contribution? What did you add to our knowledge? Limitations of your study, small sample size, only in one college or one school, for example, only with older learners or so on. You've got limitations. And then what should future research do? Again, I'm just sort of summarizing here what I said at the beginning, that I've only covered dissertation writing in a very general sense. And this is why you need to work closely with your supervisors in your particular field, and they will advise you on the structure of your dissertation and your writing and how you're going to present your results and how you're going to analyze your results. So that's very important. Again, I've only spoken today in very general terms. I'm going to finish there. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. John, and then for the wonderful presentation. And we can see that writing dissertation is challenging, but I believe that the examples and also the guideline from Prof. John's also give you the ideas and then insightful to solve the challenge. Anyone have question? I read through Prof. John on the chat. Helvi asking question. I want to ask about the abstract, how to write the correct abstract, and then what is the essence of the writing according to the writing system?
Well, the abstract is that's a good question, which I didn't talk about. And again, the abstract is usually the last thing, one of the very last things to be written about. So generally, a reader would look at, again, what's the issue or the problem that you're investigating? How did you investigate it? Very briefly. For example, you collected data through interviewing teachers or whatever. How briefly you would summarize your results. What did you find? Any particular findings? Again, 1 or 2 sentences about that. And then maybe also covering some of the contribution that you make. You know, why is this important? It contributes to knowledge in some way. Again, we're talking 1 or 2 sentences, so I've got to be brief here for each topic. And then some people may mention that within my dissertation, I make suggestions for future research and suggestions for policy, maybe government policy in the education area, or suggestions for teaching practice or pedagogical practice, depending on, of course, on the study that you've done. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure for the second question, Bu Helvi, is about what is the essence of writing according to the writing system, probably the guidelines, or
that's a pretty broad question. Again, it will vary between disciplines. So that question is a good question, but I think it needs to be directed to your supervisory team. The supervisory team will be the ones to answer that.
Yeah. Okay. Any question, Bapak Ibu? Anyone? Yeah, probably they already have the clear ideas and then
Right.
and I think I pointed out several things that Prof. Chom has been mentioned about. One regarding the contribution, because we usually talk about the research gap, novelty, and so on. And it is really insightful when you say that the contribution not must be very big in the ways of students sometimes find is challenging as well. And then the second one about the research question as the center, I think once you do the literature review, the data collection and so on, sometimes we just getting lost. So I think you need to going back to your research question. And then I agree that it is important, don't underestimate the complexity, because some people just think that only doing the interview, not that big data collection of the calculation and so on, but even that kind of research method also find the challenge. And being critical of others is not, Prof. Jones already mentioned several examples that making the language, the way we deliver the language. So thank you very much, Prof. John, for
thank
the
you.
insightful talk. And then please share the presentation. Some of
Mm.
the colleagues asking for that because the example is great to guide our students for
Mm.
writing the dissertation.
I can make that available to you if you can upload it to
Yeah.
the website. Or,
Website,
yeah,
yeah. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. And then I give back to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Oh,
John.
no worries.
Thank you, Professor Tran John, for the lecture given, and Professor Yuli Ramawati for moderating throughout the discussion.
The next thing on our agenda is a documentation session. Therefore, we invite all the distinguished guests to come forward and take picture together. And please, Professor John and Professor Yuli, you can also join the documentation session. After having such a great discussion and insightful lectures, we have finally reached the end of today's event. We, Zalfa Syaukina and Fahrendi Fikih from Duta Universitas Negeri Jakarta, would like to give our gratitude and farewell.
Thank you so much for your participation today. See you on the next occasion. Good afternoon and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Also, to all the participants, please stay on the Zoom because we would like to documentate also by taking screenshots and pictures. And also you can open your camera so you can be with us for the documentation session.